So what if the key to building a perfectly fair society wasn't just about human rules, but about something bigger? A divine question, even? Today, we're going to take one of the most famous ideas in modern philosophy and give it a really wild twist. We're going to explore how one single theological question could completely flip everything we think we know about justice.
But let me start by asking you this. Imagine you get to hit the reset button. You can design society from the ground up. What's your number one rule, your golden rule, to make sure it's fair for absolutely everyone? It's a massive question, and it's the exact puzzle one philosopher spent his life trying to solve.
So yeah, our starting point is right there, this enormous challenge of designing a truly fair society.
And that philosopher's name was John Rawls. In his incredible book, A Theory of Justice, he came up with this radical thought experiment. His goal? To figure out a way to create principles of justice that were totally, 100% free from our own personal biases. And his solution was a concept so clever and so powerful that has been shaping these debates for decades. It's called the veil of ignorance. So, how on earth does it work?
Well, Rawls asks us to imagine we're in what he calls the original position. Just picture it. You and a bunch of other people get to create the basic rules for a whole new society. But here's the catch. The process itself has to be completely and totally impartial.
And this is the genius part. To make sure it's impartial, everyone is put behind a veil of ignorance. Think of it like a temporary amnesia field. It makes you forget everything about who you are and who you're going to be in this new society you're designing.
So behind this veil, your personal identity is a total blank slate. You've no idea if you're going to be rich or poor. You don't know if you'll be a gifted athlete or have a disability. You don't know your religious beliefs, your values, or what your social standing will be. You could be literally anyone.
And that right there is the key. Since you don't know where you're going to land, you're forced to make rules that are fair for everyone, especially for the folks at the very bottom. I mean, you've never created a system that oppresses a certain group because, hey, you might end up being in that group. It's a brilliant little trick to force fairness.
Okay, so that's the classic setup, but this is where our explainer takes a really fascinating turn. The source material we're looking at takes this powerful idea from Rawls and just launches it into a whole new dimension. It asks us to imagine that while we're behind that veil, there's one more critical piece of information that's totally hidden from us, something Rawls himself never even considered. What if on top of not knowing your wealth or your talents, you also had no idea who God favored most? You don't know if it's you or your neighbor or someone you'll never meet. How does that change the rules you'd make?
All of a sudden, the stakes aren't just social or economic anymore. They become deeply, profoundly moral, spiritual even. This one little question injects a massive ethical risk into the whole thing.
Because now, you're not just worried about creating a society that's maybe a little unfair to you. You're absolutely terrified of creating a society that commits a grave injustice in the eyes of the divine.
So now you're staring down two terrifying possibilities. On the one hand, you could design a society that accidentally makes God's chosen people suffer in poverty and weakness. Or, on the other hand, you could build a world that heaps wealth and power onto those who are, well, spiritually unworthy. Either way you slice it, it's a moral catastrophe.
So when you're faced with this kind of deep, unknowable risk, what's the logical move? How do you protect against making a mistake of, cosmic proportions? Well, the source suggests a pretty clear path forward.
When you have no possible way of knowing who has divine favor, you simply can't risk creating huge gaps between the rich and the poor, the powerful and the powerless. The chance of getting it cosmically wrong is just way too high. So what's the safest, most ethical choice you can make?
The logic here is actually pretty straightforward when you break it down. 1, you have to accept that divine favor is a total mystery. 2, you have to recognize that this creates a massive moral risk. And therefore 3, the only truly safe bet is to build a society that tries to minimize those extreme gaps in wealth and power. This leads you to something called cautious egalitarianism. It's basically equality that's born out of deep, deep ethical caution. And this is the really powerful conclusion here. From this point of view, creating a more equal society isn't just a nice idea or a political goal anymore. It becomes an absolute moral imperative. It's the only way to be sure you're not committing a divine injustice.
Ultimately, as the source material puts it, the goal is to create a kind of justice that thinks about more than just our relationships with each other. It's about striving for a justice that works from our human perspective and from a divine one too.
So it leaves us with this huge, lingering question. Does real justice demand that we plan not just for the world we see, but also for the great mysteries we can't? That's a question that goes way beyond philosophy, and it's definitely something worth chewing on. Thanks for tuning in.